When gold hits $2,600, most people see a number going up. Historians see a countdown clock starting. Everyone celebrating gold hitting record highs is missing what it actually means. They're watching the Titanic's band play and calling it a concert. They're cheering as the life rafts deploy, not understanding that life rafts only deploy when the ship is sinking. Gold doesn't surge because your wealth is growing. Gold surges because the system protecting your wealth is dying. And right now, gold just crossed $2,600. Here's what makes that number terrifying. Adjusted for inflation and purchasing power, we've seen this exact crisis threshold 3 times in recorded history. Ancient Rome when the aureus price exploded in the 3rd century. 1970s America when gold shattered from $35 to $850. And the 2008 to 2011 sovereign debt crisis when gold nearly touched $2,000. 3 different civilizations. 3 different currencies. 3 different centuries. The pattern is always identical. Within 18 months of gold crossing these crisis-equivalent levels, empires collapsed. Currencies died. Societies fractured. The Roman Empire splintered into 3 separate kingdoms. The post-World War II American global order shattered. The European Union nearly dissolved as sovereign debt spiraled out of control. Every single time. You think gold going up means your wealth is safe. That rising gold prices protect your purchasing power. That you're winning. The elites know something different. They know gold rising means the system holding everyone else's wealth is in terminal failure. They're not celebrating the number going up, they're evacuating before the public realizes what's happening. Right now, tonight, central bank vaults across the world are being restocked with physical gold at levels not seen in 55 years. Private jets are carrying bullion across borders. Wire transfers are converting paper assets to metal. The people with access to classified economic briefings, the ones who see the real numbers behind the government statistics, are moving their wealth into the one asset that survives currency collapse. And they're doing it while gold is at all-time highs. Think about that. The smart money doesn't buy at tops. Unless the top isn't the top. Unless what looks expensive in dollars is actually cheap in reality. Unless gold isn't rising, everything else is collapsing. Tonight, we're examining 3 moments when gold hit this crisis threshold, when it reached purchasing power equivalent levels that signaled elite panic and currency death. We're going to watch the exact same pattern unfold across 2,000 years of human history. Rome in the 3rd century crisis. America in the 1970s stagflation collapse. And 2024, right now, where we've just crossed that threshold again. The pattern never changes. Only the names and the dates. Here's the part that should keep you awake tonight. Gold doesn't rise because the economy is strong. Gold rises because the people who run the economy have lost faith in it. When central banks, the institutions that create currency, start buying gold aggressively, they're telling you something. They're telling you that the money they print isn't worth holding. They're telling you that the system is reaching its breaking point. And they're telling you that you have approximately 12 to 24 months before that breaking point becomes public knowledge. Gold at $2,600 isn't a market milestone. It's a historical marker. It's the moment when the informed start preparing for what the uninformed can't yet see. It's the alarm bell that only rings right before catastrophic failure. The question is whether you'll understand what it means before the 18-month window closes. But why? Why does gold surge predict collapse? To understand that, you need to see what gold actually measures, and it's not what you think. Gold doesn't measure wealth. It measures fear. Specifically, it measures elite fear of currency death. That's the secret they don't teach in economics classes. That's what every central banker understands but will never say publicly. Gold price movements aren't about supply and demand for jewelry or industrial use. They're about confidence, or the catastrophic loss of it, in the paper currencies that governments create from nothing. The pattern is always identical. Watch how it unfolds, because once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere across history. Stage 1, normal times. Gold barely moves. It sits there, inert, boring. Why would it move? The currency works. Institutions function. Nobody questions whether their paycheck will be worth something next week. Nobody hoards physical cash. Nobody converts savings to hard assets. Trust is the invisible foundation holding everything together. Stage 2, the crisis. War. Debt spirals. Political collapse. A trigger event forces governments into an impossible corner. They face a choice: default on obligations, admitting they can't pay what they promised, or print new money to cover debts they can't afford. Stage 3, they always print. Every single government chooses the same path. Democrat or Republican. Parliamentary or authoritarian. Ancient or modern. They all choose to create more money rather than admit insolvency. They call it quantitative easing or monetary stimulus or necessary liquidity. The words change. The mechanism never does. Stage 4, Elite Flight. Here's where it gets interesting. The elites aren't stupid. They sit in closed-door meetings with Treasury officials. They read the classified briefings. They see the currency supply charts curving exponentially upward. They know printing money destroys currency. They know it the same way you know touching fire burns. So while they're printing your money, they're converting their wealth to gold. Picture it, wire transfer confirmations pinging across screens in Geneva and Singapore. Tonnage of physical gold moving quietly from public markets to private vaults. No announcements. No press releases. Just positions being closed and converted. The quiet exodus of people who know what's coming. Stage 5, the visible signal. Gold price surges. This is when the public finally sees what's been happening in private. When gold crosses crisis thresholds, when it reaches 5% to 7% of the total money supply, it means the people with access to classified economic data are running for the exits. It means the informed have lost faith. And that loss of faith is about to become contagious. Stage 6, public collapse. Within 12 to 24 months, the currency collapse the elites anticipated becomes public reality. Inflation accelerates. Savings evaporate. The middle class discovers their life's work was denominated in something that's dying. Social cohesion fractures. Political extremism surges. The system breaks. Every single time. Here's the psychological trap that catches every leader: they all believe they can print just enough to solve the crisis without triggering collapse. They watched other nations fall. They studied the history. And they convinced themselves they were different. Their economists were smarter. Their institutions stronger. Their currency more trusted. They all believed they were different. Until they weren't. Why does it take 18 months specifically? Because that's how long it takes for newly printed currency to move through the system. For prices to adjust upward. For inflation to hit grocery stores and gas pumps. For public confidence to crack. For the political consensus to shatter. For the social fabric to tear. The machinery of collapse operates on a timetable. And gold crossing crisis threshold starts the countdown. So when you see gold at $2,600, understand what you're actually seeing. You're seeing the visible part of invisible panic. You're seeing the alarm bell that only rings right before the fire becomes unstoppable. Sound familiar? It should. Because we're going to watch this exact pattern unfold 3 times across history, each time faster than the last. First, ancient Rome, where the collapse took decades but followed the identical sequence. The Roman denarius had been the world's reserve currency for 300 years. Citizens across the empire trusted it the way Americans trust the dollar today, completely, unquestionably, as a permanent feature of reality itself. That trust was about to be shattered. By 235 AD, Rome faced a perfect storm of crises. Barbarian invasions hammered every border simultaneously. Political assassinations became routine. 50 different emperors would claim the throne in just 50 years, most dying violently within months. Military spending exploded as legions fought on all fronts to defend an empire that was collapsing inward. The Roman government faced the same impossible choice every empire faces: default on obligations to soldiers and citizens, or debase the currency to keep paying. Emperor Caracalla made the decision in 211 AD. He began systematically reducing the silver content of the denarius. From 95% pure silver, a standard held for centuries, down to 50%. Then lower. The imperial mints melted existing coins, mixed the silver with cheap bronze, and restruck them at face value. Instant money creation. Problem solved. Nobody panicked. Rome had survived worse. The Punic Wars. Civil wars. Barbarian threats before. The currency still functioned. Markets still operated. Life continued, for now. But watch what the elites did. Roman aristocrats and senators, the ones with access to imperial decisions, the ones who saw the debasement happening, began quietly hoarding gold ore. They converted their denarii holdings before the public debasement became obvious. They knew what was coming because they were sitting in the rooms where the decisions were made. The pattern never changes. Here's how the collapse accelerated. By 235 AD, the denarius had fallen to 50% silver. By 250 AD, just 5% silver. By 270 AD, it was 0.5% silver, essentially bronze with a silver wash so thin you could scratch it off with your fingernail. And citizens did exactly that. They scratched coins and watched the silver coating flake away, revealing the bronze underneath. Merchants began weighing every single transaction, rejecting coins that felt too light in their hands. Markets descended into chaos as nobody knew what anything was actually worth. Was this coin real silver? Was it half silver? Was it worthless bronze painted silver? Meanwhile, gold told the truth. In 200 AD, one gold aureus bought 25 denarii. By 280 AD, that same gold coin bought 1,000 denarii, a 40-time surge in purchasing power. Gold wasn't rising. The denarius was dying. And the gold price was the obituary being written in real time. The human cost was catastrophic. Middle-class merchants who had saved their entire lives in denarii watched a lifetime of work evaporate. A merchant who retired in 240 AD with enough denarii to live comfortably discovered by 270 AD that his entire savings couldn't buy a week's worth of grain. A single generation saw complete wealth destruction. Grain prices doubled monthly, then weekly, as the currency lost its function as a store of value. Aristocrats melted denarii by the thousands just to extract the remaining specks of silver. The economy didn't collapse all at once, it bled out slowly as trust evaporated transaction by transaction. Here's where the 18-month pattern appears even in ancient Rome. From the moment gold aureus prices crossed crisis thresholds around 260 AD, when the gold to denarii ratio hit levels that signaled terminal currency failure, Rome had approximately 24 months before the crisis of the 3rd century reached its terminal phase. By 284 AD, the empire had fractured into 3 separate kingdoms. The Gallic Empire in the west. The Palmyrene Empire in the east. A hollowed-out Roman core barely holding the center. Borderlands lost forever. Institutional collapse complete. The lesson cuts like a blade. The gold price told the truth while the government insisted the denarius was as good as ever. The elites believed gold. The public believed propaganda. Only one group survived with their wealth intact. Rome's collapse took decades because information traveled slowly, by foot, by horse, by ship. But the 1970s proved the pattern accelerates with modern communication. And what took Rome 50 years took America less than a decade. In 1970, the dollar was the undisputed global reserve currency. The United States had never defaulted. Gold was fixed at $35 per ounce by international agreement. The British Empire still existed on maps. The post-World War II order, American hegemony, Bretton Woods stability, Western dominance, seemed as permanent as Rome once did. It was about to disintegrate in less than a decade. The crisis triggers came from multiple directions simultaneously. Vietnam War spending hemorrhaged billions with no victory in sight. Great Society programs expanded faster than tax revenues could cover. And then France, led by Charles de Gaulle who didn't trust American promises, began demanding gold redemption for dollar reserves. The math was brutal and simple. The US had printed far more dollars than it had gold to back them. The bluff was being called. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon made the decision. He closed the gold window. Ended Bretton Woods. The dollar became pure fiat currency, backed by nothing except the promise that the government would limit supply. Economists praised the flexibility. Politicians celebrated monetary liberation from archaic gold standards. The public barely noticed. Life continued. Markets opened Monday morning. Nothing seemed to change. But watch what the elites did. Central banks immediately began accumulating physical gold. Foreign governments quietly converted dollar reserves to hard assets. Smart money, the people who understood what fiat currency actually meant, fled to tangible value. They knew that a currency backed by nothing but promises could be printed without limit. And they knew what unlimited printing does to purchasing power. The pattern never changes. Here's how fast it accelerated. 1971, gold broke free from $35. By 1974, it hit $180, a 5x increase in 3 years. By 1978, $220. Then the acceleration went exponential. January 1980, $850 per ounce. A 24 times increase in just 9 years. Let that number sink in. $850 gold in 1980, adjusted for inflation, equals approximately $2,600 today. We're at the exact same crisis threshold right now. Watch what happened in those 9 years. Watch the pattern of systemic collapse unfold in real time. 1971, gold window closes. The foundation cracks. 1973, oil crisis. OPEC embargo. Gas lines wrapping around city blocks for the first time in American history. Gold hits $120. Families waiting hours just to fill their tanks at price-controlled pumps that were running dry. 1974, Nixon resigns in disgrace. The British Empire officially dissolves, the sun finally sets on centuries of dominance. America loses Vietnam. The post-World War II consensus shatters. Gold climbs higher. 1979, Iran revolution topples a key U.S. ally. Second oil shock. Soviet Union invades Afghanistan, emboldened by American weakness. Gold crosses $400, then $600. The crisis threshold has been breached. 1980, gold peaks at $850. U.S. interest rates hit 20%, mortgages become impossible, economic activity freezes. Inflation reaches 13.5%, your savings lose more than 1/10 of their value in a single year. 1981, recession. Unemployment over 10%. Reagan begins systematically dismantling the New Deal order. Paul Volcker administers economic chemotherapy, raising interest rates so high it nearly kills the patient just to kill the inflation. From the moment gold crossed $600 in late 1979, the historical crisis threshold to complete systemic breakdown was exactly 18 months. The pattern, once again, held perfectly. The human cost was devastating. Middle-class savings accounts destroyed by 13% annual inflation. Retirees on fixed incomes watched their purchasing power cut in half in just 5 years. Factory workers laid off as industries collapsed under impossible interest rates. Supermarket price tags being remarked weekly, then daily, milk, bread, meat becoming luxury items for families that could afford them easily just years before. Jimmy Carter gave his infamous malaise speech, a sitting president admitting on national television that he couldn't fix what was breaking. The American dream wasn't deferred. It was dying in real time. The British Empire ended. American global dominance shattered. The Soviet Union, sensing weakness, expanded aggressively. Iran fell to revolution. The entire post-World War II order collapsed and had to be rebuilt from scratch. And here's the inversion that everyone missed: people celebrating gold gains didn't understand they were getting rich in gold because their currency was dying. Winning in gold meant losing in everything else. The celebration was a funeral. If you think that was bad, it gets worse. Because in 2024, we've crossed the same inflation-adjusted gold threshold, but this time, the collapse won't be regional. It will be global. And it's already starting. Gold just crossed $2,600. In inflation-adjusted terms, we're at the exact same crisis level as 1980 and Rome's terminal phase. The pattern doesn't care about technology or modern economics. It doesn't care about smartphones or artificial intelligence or digital banking. It only cares about what gold is measuring: elite panic about currency death. And right now, that panic is flashing at levels we haven't seen in generations. Look at the crisis triggers converging simultaneously, the same impossible pressures that broke Rome and shattered 1970s America: unsustainable debt. U.S. national debt just crossed $35 trillion. But here's what makes it terrifying: we're adding $1 trillion every 100 days. Not every year. Every 100 days. The math doesn't work. It can't work. Everyone in power knows it can't work. Currency printing. The Federal Reserve balance sheet sits at $8 trillion, 5 times larger than 2008. Trillions created from nothing since 2020. The same solution Rome chose. The same solution Nixon chose. Print money to cover obligations you can't afford. Political fracture. Institutional legitimacy at multi-generational lows. Half the country doesn't trust election results. The other half doesn't trust the courts. Congress has single-digit approval ratings. The center cannot hold. Global instability. Ukraine war grinding into its 3rd year. Gaza exploding. Taiwan tensions escalating. BRICS nations actively building alternative currency systems to escape dollar dominance. The post-1944 order is being dismantled in real time. Just like Rome and 1970s America, our governments chose print over default. The decision has already been made. Trillions created since 2020. And the elites, the ones who understand what printing does to currency, know exactly what comes next. Watch what they're doing. Central banks bought 1,136 metric tons of gold in 2022, the highest level in 55 years. Not Western central banks hedging. Eastern central banks fleeing. China accumulating month after month with mechanical precision. Russia converting every available dollar to gold. India, Turkey, Poland, Singapore, all building gold reserves at unprecedented rates. Billionaires aren't buying gold ETFs or coins. They're buying gold mining companies. Actual ownership of production. When you expect currency to die, you don't just want the metal, you want the source. The pattern is playing out again. But this time, it's faster. Rome took 50 years from crisis to collapse. The 1970s took 9 years. This time? The pattern is compressing. Why? Because digital currency enables instant global capital flight. Because information spreads at light speed, confidence can collapse overnight instead of over decades. Because the global financial system is so interconnected that collapse won't be regional like Rome or national like 1970s America. It will cascade across every border simultaneously. The numerical parallels are precise and terrifying. Gold-to-money supply ratio matches 1980 crisis levels exactly. Central bank gold purchases match 1970s panic accumulation patterns. Currency debasement, measured by purchasing power loss, is tracking Rome's trajectory. Real interest rates, adjusted for actual inflation, are negative just like 1979. Every metric that predicted collapse before is flashing red right now. The warning signs aren't subtle anymore. Japan was forced to defend the yen for the first time since 1998, spending billions to prevent currency collapse. The UK pension system required emergency central bank intervention to prevent total failure. The Swiss National Bank, legendary for stability, reported its first loss in history. Commercial real estate is collapsing as $1.5 trillion in debt comes due at rates that don't cash flow. Regional bank failures, Silicon Valley Bank, Signature, First Republic, required emergency government seizure. Every month brings another unforeseen crisis requiring emergency intervention. Every month, the system comes closer to breaking completely. Walk outside and see it with your own eyes. Homeless encampments in major cities that didn't exist 5 years ago. Pull up your grocery receipts, eggs, milk, bread cost double what they did in 2020. Check your bank statement, the same salary buys 20% less than 4 years ago. Young people living with parents into their 30s because housing became unaffordable in a single decade. The middle class is being hollowed out in real time. You're watching it happen. You're living through it. If the pattern holds, and it always has, we have approximately 12 to 24 months from gold crossing crisis threshold to systemic breakdown. That clock started in late 2023 or early 2024, which means the window is already closing. But understand what collapse means this time. Not just one empire falling like Rome. Not just one hegemon weakening like 1970s America. This time, the entire dollar-based global reserve system, the foundation of international trade, debt, and power since 1944, is reaching terminal phase. When the global reserve currency dies, everything built on top of it dies too. So who's actually buying gold at $2,600? Not average investors. They're priced out. The buyers are central banks and the ultra-wealthy, the people with access to classified economic data. The people who know something you don't. Yet, across 2,000 years of history, when gold reaches crisis-equivalent purchasing power levels, empires collapse within 18 months, and we just crossed that threshold. We watched Rome hoard gold ore as the denarius died, silver content dropping from 95% to 0.5%, the empire fracturing into 3 pieces within 24 months of gold crossing crisis levels. We watched elites flee to gold as the 1970s order collapsed, the dollar severed from gold backing, inflation hitting 13.5%, interest rates reaching 20%, the entire post-World War II consensus shattering in less than a decade. And now we're watching central banks accumulate gold at record levels, 1,136 tons in 2022 alone, as the dollar-based system that has anchored global trade since 1944 reaches terminal phase. The pattern never changes. Only the names and dates. The question isn't whether this collapse will happen. Rome couldn't print forever. America in the 1970s couldn't print forever. And we can't print forever, not with $35 trillion in debt growing by $1 trillion every 100 days, not with $8 trillion in printed currency since 2008, not with $175 trillion in unfunded liabilities that cannot possibly be paid. The mathematics are inescapable. The laws of economics cannot be suspended indefinitely. The question is when. And the gold price is screaming the answer. You're living through a historical inflection point. Future historians will look at 2024 the way we look at 271 AD or 1971, the moment when the old system ended and something new, painful, and transformative began. Most people living through those moments didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. They believed the denarius would recover. They believed the dollar was temporarily weak. They believed their leaders when they promised everything would be fine. Everything you think is safe, your savings account, your 401k, your retirement plan, your purchasing power, is denominated in currencies that the informed elites are fleeing. Gold isn't rising because it's becoming more valuable. Your money is collapsing because governments are destroying it through unlimited printing. The difference matters. Right now, today, central banks are buying gold at levels not seen in 55 years. Billionaires are buying gold mines, not just bullion, ownership of the source, not just the product. Family offices are converting paper wealth to hard assets. They're not panicking. They're preparing. They've read the same history you just did. They understand the pattern. They know what comes next. The window is closing. In Rome, if you converted to gold ore in 260 AD, you survived the crisis of the 3rd century with your wealth intact. If you waited until 280 AD when the collapse was obvious to everyone, you lost everything. In 1970s America, if you bought gold at $100 in 1972, you preserved wealth through the stagflation disaster. If you waited until $800 in 1980 when panic was setting in, you were too late, you bought at the peak of fear instead of the beginning of recognition. The window is always narrow. I'm not telling you this will be okay. It won't. Empires collapsing is never okay for the people living through it. Rome's 3rd century crisis destroyed the middle class. The 1970s shattered the American dream for an entire generation. But some people emerge with their wealth intact, and some lose everything. The difference is pattern recognition and early action. We're approximately 6 to 12 months into the 18-month window right now. That leaves 6 to 12 months before the recognition phase ends and panic begins. When panic starts, preparation ends. The herd moves all at once, and by then, it's too late to position defensively. Gold at $2,600 is not a market event. It's a historical marker. The elites are running. The question is whether you'll understand what that means before it's too late. If this opened your eyes to a pattern you hadn't seen before, hit subscribe. Because while we can't stop what's coming, we can prepare for it. And the next 18 months will determine whether you're financially destroyed by history or merely scarred by it. History doesn't repeat, but if you ignore its lessons, it will crush you. The last time gold hit crisis levels, empires collapsed within 18 months. Here we are. The clock is ticking.